so. I just noticed that as I was about to send a letter, there was anxiety coming up. And I was like, well, it's still there. It's still there. How can that still be there? And I felt into it. How can that still be there that I'm afraid to claim my space? Simply claim my space and communicate that. These are my boundaries. And communicate that. Why is there that anxiety in communicating that? So I'm connecting once again with that feeling. And of course, I know where it comes from. Imprinted. When I wasn't allowed to have my space. Or when claiming my space somehow was a threat. Claiming my space, meaning being with myself. Meaning not separating off, disassociating. No, that's something else. Disassociating is something else. It's a different kind of separating off. When in communication, when you're a child, with your caretaker, primary caretaker, that you are completely dependent on. Separating off from yourself means you are separating off from feeling yourself and staying with yourself while in the presence of your primary caretaker, as opposed to giving all your attention to your primary caretaker and then reacting to that. Listening, but it's not about listening. It's about what was being subconsciously expected of me was to receive the negative emotion of my primary caretaker. And it feels very good to say that, because the truth always feels good and it always sets you free. So the negative emotion, to receive the negative emotion, is like to take it in, and then feel it myself, and then feel really bad. The story is, so the story I'm then receiving is I'm bad. Something bad about me, something wrong about me. And when I would refuse energetically to receive that, if I would close off to this negative energy, not be open to it, go into my own world, and I could only do that by being present with myself, listening to my own voice inside, feeling my own heart, and kind of ignoring thereby. Actually, it's just a shift of attention. And this can even be done, it can be done while your eyes are focused on the other person, but the other person will immediately feel, that's how it was, immediately feel the refusal to receive them, the refusal to receive the negative emotion, negative energy, because it really is like an energy coming at you. Many people can see this. The people that can see auras, they can see the energies going back and forth. And there are those energies that are supportive, that they come from they're not fear-based, and they come from love. They're loving and supportive. And then they give you energy and it feels good. And they empower you. That doesn't mean that you get power from them. It means that they empower you to connect with yourself, to feel yourself, and feel how good you feel. They empower you to self-connect, because that's where they're coming from self-connection. And that's what feels good. That's the unity consciousness. So when you are in unison, in alignment with your soul, you feel that safety and connection from within. You are in your truth. You are in the alignment of your light stream, your column of light. You are coming from your heart. You're coming from love. And that supports all of that in the other. And it is this warm energy that comes. And that's the one. I don't want to say extreme. It's not extreme. That's the empowering. That's the connected. That's the positive energy exchange. And it works exactly opposite also in the negative. In the negative, it's the other way around. In the negative, first of all, it happens unconsciously. This can only happen within the unconsciousness of it. It's a driving force that is like a rider that rides you, and you are powerless to it. The negative emotions, when they have certain force behind them, certain, let's say, percentage of charge, then in comparison, or at the same time, your consciousness not being bigger than it to catch it and hold it. And now that's how you don't let it ride you, is by feeling it. You take it inside. You take you eat your own negative emotion, and that's how you feel it, heal it, by taking it in and feeling it, your own negative emotion. I'm getting to something, and I've never talked about this because this has never come up before, but I sense I'm getting to something that has been a question in my mind about other people's emotions and your own emotions, especially when you're like me. When you're very empathic, this is not conscious. Others' emotions and your own is the same like your own. So, with the process of the negative, is that, so it comes up, let's say anger, projection happens. So you get triggered. Okay, I'm now from the perspective of the caretaker. This is a scenario: child caretaker, primary caretaker. Of course, parent. I mean, parent. But it's just that I'm talking about the principles. I'm not telling a story here. I'm in that sense, the story is the inspiration, but I'm talking about how the principles work, and I'm feeling into that, and I'm getting it that way. So, this negative emotion comes up, is triggered by, usually, if you're alone, it's a thought. It could be something you see on television, or it could be a thought that comes to your mind, or it could be someone else. And then the projection happens. It just, the negative emotion shoots at that person, goes out to that person. Now, as we're talking about the scenario caretaker child, so this is the child feels like this terrible energy coming at it. It's being overpowered. The child goes into fear. Yeah, and when I ask myself, why is there still this anxiety about setting up, just communicating where I'm at and communicating my boundaries? That's not even saying stay out, but it is suggesting, okay, this is what I want right now. This space here, this is what I claim. And so then everyone knows if they want to support me, they are not going to bombard me with any kind of, the kind of exchange that I communicated I'm not open to right now. Of course they could, but then I wouldn't answer. But why is there, in this case, anxiety about communicating these boundaries? In general, anxiety about communicating boundaries. Why is there anxiety? And that is because when I remember this, if I would have boundaries. Now, especially this is always where the meat is, where the most charged emotion is, the most charged negative emotion. That's where we hold the most energy is trapped and frozen there until what? Until what happens? Until we resolve it. Until it can come back into a flow. How can it come back into a flow? It needs to be resolved. And I'll get to that in a moment, how it gets resolved. It needs to heal itself, needs to come back into truth, because negative emotion is coming from split off emotion. So it's coming from someone who is not in alignment with their soul. It's coming from where the soul aspect within the physical body is locked into, identified with the conditioned mind and draws its self-image out of that. As opposed to, so the self-image, it's all in the story, as opposed to just being and feeling. And all of that energy that is locked in the story that is based on false premise of separation and I am this that is now but an image in the mind, is very agitated because it's split off from its source. It doesn't know, it's not aware of its being that is here, that is the soul, that is the consciousness that is here, that is feeling. The conscious feeling, however, not having emotions and reacting to them. That's, charge, 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 reaction, reaction, reaction. So what happens when I have this negative charge come from me into, through a projection onto another and the other person, especially in this case, the child, if it's not taking it on. And usually, so normally the child, in the beginning, it always takes it on, but after a while, it will develop some survival mechanism. It will develop a way to not want to take that on anymore, when it's too much, and it will develop a way to close itself off from it. So, however, when that happened in my experience, that I did not take that on and that I stayed within myself and closed myself off, what happened was that not receiving of the negative energy would, to the power of, it would potentialize, it would agitize my primary caretaker that I was dependent on, and of course that my parent that I loved more than anything in the world, of course, and where it was total need that was just there to always have that door open of love flowing, and anything that was less than that the love was flowing, because I loved so much the children love their parents so much, and so if the parents close that door, because children they don't close that door. That first comes later, after all of this experience, they start to close that door. It's not about closing the door of love, you see. That's not what it's about. But the parent has already is coming from a closed door of love to themselves, because it's what's behind that door is too painful and hasn't been felt yet. And so there's this vacuum, there's this unconsciousness, and that's where all the negative charge flows through and is in this play of action, reaction, of projection. And then the negative charge, and it is negatively charged because it's all this emotion that was, again, from them, taken on from their parents in their childhood. It's like so forth. It's all this energy taken on, coming from the primary caretaker, where they were cut off from themselves, from their soul. That's the split off energy, and that's why it's negative. If it comes back, it can only come back by feeling it. But the feeling of it can only happen when there's not, at the same time, a projection going on, a story going on in the mind, entertaining that story, because that again, and believing then in that story, because that again would be reinforcing that this story is what it's about. It's a true story. Reinforcing the self-image, your character in a story, that is the identification with an image, as opposed to being, true being. And only the true being in the here and now, your soul, can heal and reunite. So it can heal all the negative charge that you have as a child taken on. And why did you take it on? Because what happens if you don't take it on? The projection in the primary caretaker is, oh my God, they're not taking, this is unconscious. Remember, they're in a state of unconsciousness when this is happening. It's all automatic. So the information that is coming back is, they are refusing me. And of course, this will be, I say of course because there's a lot going on now. First of all, now they're there with this terrible feeling that is not being received by the other person's aura, so now they're stuck with it, so to speak. But it happened in the first place because they don't want to feel it, because it hurts so much. It hurts so much, they don't know how to feel it because it's too big. There's trauma. They're not ready yet. So now they're stuck with the negative feeling while the projection is on you, and you are the trigger of it in the first place. So this will reinforce and make it even more. It's like bouncing off a wall back at you, and it's like, whoa, magnifying glass. Then the projection is that the child doesn't love the parent, even though it's coming, of course, from the projection that you are at that point not loving yourself. At the moment that you are unconscious to your pain and let that pain through your unconsciousness take its course and throw it at the other that you're projecting onto, especially your child. Now, another thing that happens is the soul is always present, even though it's buried under all this egoic mind, which is the identification within the conditioned mind. But the soul is always present, and it has its, even though it's not very loud in the forefront, it's part of the symphony. It's a part of the whole symphony, and the soul. So what happens when you do injustice to anyone, and especially to your own child, there's that feeling on the way back. Somewhere on the way back to the soul, somewhere in that field of your being, there is that feeling of guilt. Yeah. And then you also have the feeling of guilt in the first place for leaving yourself in the wake of trying to survive, in the wake of surviving with your primary caretaker, who would expect you to receive their negative energy and to give you their attention, because that's what soothes them. It makes them right. It justifies them in a way. So you adapt, and you learn what they need to feel soothed, so that you don't exasperate this negative emotion. So you keep the negative charge at a minimum, and you learn this as a child naturally to adapt and bend yourself that way. But you learn by also by experiencing what doesn't work. One thing that doesn't work is, or didn't work is to stay in my own space and just let that pearl off, like water off a duck's back, and say, okay, that's not mine, that's not mine. And I didn't do it. I know that I'm a good person, and I know I didn't do anything wrong, and I know I don't deserve this terrible energy. But of course the child doesn't know this. The child is just functioning, has this natural inbuilt intelligence to survive, and in that it adapts to the person it is dependent on completely, and it has the natural need to keep the heart space open. Of course, that is also why children trigger their primary caretakers so much, because their heart space is open to their prime. They love them so much, and their heart is open. And love will always bring up everything unlike itself, because it's the highest frequency, so it will bring up all the lower frequencies. And so all those places where the parent has not yet reconciled their own split off, negatively charged energies that are blocked in their bodies, they will be triggered. They will come loose. They will come to the surface. And if it's stronger than the consciousness of the parent, it will take over and take the route of projection, and then take this route. It is like the it is the pattern. The pattern repeats. The only thing is, that's not a thing, but the only thing that in the matter of speech, saying the only thing that can break this cycle, this pattern of negative reinforcement, of negative conditioning, of fear-based conditioning, of splitting yourself off, because the only way you can receive this negative energy is by splitting really receive it, is by now I'm saying this and something else is coming, I'll say it after, is by receive it is by splitting yourself off from yourself and holding your attention with your primary caretaker, or with the person that you are receiving the negative energy from, that are projecting onto you. You are with them in that story, and you are agreeing. Because the other thing is, you buy into the story, and if you give a counter attack, so to speak, you're not going to do that as a child. Well, I know there are children who can do that, so wait a minute. Fearless children, yes, but for me that wasn't an option. I mean, I was way too afraid. So it always depends on your situation, and you have this innate, inbuilt knowing what you need to do to survive and to surf, to try and stay in harmony with to try and stay in love, with the love being open to flow with your parent. And that's why, there are great differences here. Here's the other thing that came. You can do that. You can receive someone else's negative emotion while staying in your own self present. But this only can work with consciousness. This only happens when consciousness is at that level and is ready. Where there is still fear-based, and that can only be there where there is an unconscious identification with that story of who you are. So as long as there is more of your attention fixed in that story of unconscious identification, in comparison to consciousness, which is presence, it's being, and it's knowing of yourself, of your true self. So depending on what is more, you will either engage and go into reaction, and then into the negative cycle, or you can break the pattern with your consciousness. And as usually it takes until you're adult to get to this point, as it's not usual that children have that amount of consciousness with their parents. But it's definitely possible. And I'm sure there are children like that, especially now. And I'm sure there have been children like that, yes. So I'm just speaking from my own experience, where that wasn't the case. And where I noticed that I needed to receive the negative energy coming at me. I was not allowed to not pay attention to it, to block it off. And here's the big difference. Because if it's not that you are fully conscious, that you are consciously receiving it and feeling it, actually you are not even receiving the other person's negative emotion. You're not even receiving that, like that cloud of emotion that's coming at you when you are conscious. Because when you are conscious, you are feeling yourself. And you're then in that alignment with your soul, in that strong presence. First of all, it would be unlikely that you would be projected onto and that you would trigger others in this kind of alignment and strong presence. But it can happen. So it could happen. And then you would be fully present within yourself, but also present with the other. And then what would happen, and here's the big difference, is that it's not that you would receive the negative emotion. Like I remember it as, and I still have this experience of like literally having no, it's just coming right into me and it feels horrible and I feel like I've been poisoned in a way and don't know how to protect myself. Yeah. So what would happen in full alignment and presence? So presence is consciousness. Yes, consciousness is present. Is that the negative emotion would dissolve and would get healed in your aura. So it's not even protection in that sense, it's healing. Your field, as it is not projecting, but it is glowing more or less. You are sitting in your own presence. And that's the strongest field because you are aligned with your soul, you are in love. Now, negative emotion starts to hit this field on the atomic level. And the negative charge, boom, it disappears. It goes back to neutral. It's just energy, and actually it feels really good because now it's freed, it's neutral, no more negative charge. It's not agitated anymore. It's liberated. It's liberated. And that will actually heal the other person, or it will help and support the other person as well. And then the other person doesn't have, then, even though its negative emotion wasn't received in, and the person didn't go into the story with the person where that's projecting, but what's happening is the pattern has been dissolved. That negative cycle has been broken. The only way it can be broken is by healing it. So it is that what's actually wanting to happen within that person that's projecting, which is to receive your negative emotion, your own emotions, instead of to project it. So as soon as it's triggered, wonderful, that's mine. As soon as it's triggered, this is my gift. It's not yours, it's mine. All this hatred, all this anger, all this frustration that I am projecting onto the outside, in reality, it's only the trigger, okay? This is the trigger. The outside is the trigger. But the emotion that it is triggering is within me, and it's old. It's much older than this situation. And that is why the situation is happening, so that this old stuff, this old negative, compressed, stuck emotion that is blocking the peak performance of my energetic and then also my anatomical, physical body, can be healed, can be released, can come back into the flow. But it can first come back into the flow. It needs to be triggered. And then there's like two things that can happen. It either in the unconsciousness of it just gets projected, and then there's this game. Projection, rejection, projection, projection, back and forth. It gets exasperated, and the block, instead of having been released, actually now it has become stronger charge. The charge has been fed, so to speak, and it grows. It grows, it grows, it grows, it grows. That's why at some point people go haywire, they go postal. At some point there has to be some kind of break out of it. And depending on, at some point, if any kind, if this always is this game happening of, it gets more, projection, instead of that consciousness gets that consciousness becomes aware of it. That consciousness grows within you, and then the healing begins. And it actually that's why it also gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because at some point the outbreak, the projection is so large that the charge is so big that it breaks down the system, in crying, for example, and crying. And that's then the nervous system that is releasing all the negative charge. And in the moment of, if you remember moments like this, where you break down and you just cry your eyes out, you bawl your eyes out, in that moment you can actually feel, first of all, in those moments you cannot be entertaining the story. Your mind is blank. Finally, and that's what it took to get your mind to be blank, because you can only release, truly release, instead of going again in a loop and recharging. You can only truly release when you feel it. And so then in that, sometimes it has to get so big that it can break down the system, that it takes over control. It takes over the control, and the mind gives up, and all these emotions come flowing out, and are crying, 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 that those are the tears coming from the heart. All the tears hold all this memory. It's like the little crystals where memory is, you know, when tears are dry, they are like little crystals in your eyes. And that is, you know, that a crystal stores memory. Every computer has a crystal. So that is, these are pockets of memory that you are releasing, that have been stuck, and the charge that has been stuck within you. So it is a release. So it's how the system heals itself. It always tries to, by triggering itself, by, you know, attracting those kind of situations that will trigger you. And then there's these two possibilities, but this depends on the amount of the percentage of consciousness that is available in that moment, that is awake in that moment when it's triggered. So if the consciousness is less than the charge, is less than the, okay, if the energy stream of the soul, if more of that stream is split off and identified in the conditioned mind, then aware of soul, aware of self, present, conscious, then it will continue to recharge and continue to go into this play of projection. And if, okay, and we'll come back to the child, what's happening there, because this is very important. This comes right back to what I said in the beginning, and it'll come full circle. Okay. Right, and if consciousness hasn't grown to that extent that it is, that the soul stream, the soul consciousness is more in presence, more has regrouped, has received itself, has reeled back in its attention, its not awareness, its attention, its yes, attention. So you have your soul stream, and then there is focus. Like, what are you focused on, right? There's attention, and attention is like this scope of light that is being, you know, like what the iris does, you know, how it's shaping the scope of light, and how strong and pointed and piercing and thin is it, or how widely open is it, and where is your attention focused on. So if it's unconsciously focused on, then there is no control over that. There is no way to know that. It's unconscious. So how to get that into consciousness is, you know, where you are falsely identified, yeah, is by having these triggers of negative emotion happening, because all this identification with an image of yourself is false, is not true, and is happened also through the split off of your soul stream. So where the energy splits off and is then fixated, belief. You have a belief about yourself, and that's always about yourself is the inside, and that equivalent of that to the outside is you have that same belief about the world. And then maybe it's worded a little bit different, but it holds the same energy, it holds the same feeling of it. So the way you feel about something on the outside, that's how you feel about yourself on the inside. But if that is not aware to you, If that is in your unconscious, it is working, it is holding that frequency, but you have no way to get to it until it's triggered. Children will do this for parents, not that they do it consciously, but this is just how it works because they're so open, as I said, with their heart field is so open, and they're so, that they will very easily then trigger in their parents all these areas. And then it continues until it gets really, really big, and then the crash comes. Oftentimes the crash, so this release, then finally, oftentimes it will happen through accidents or illnesses. If it cannot happen consciously, so that, for example, someone works on themselves consciously and does consciousness work and does soul work and does, looks at basically understands that things, they cannot change them on the outside to finally come into well-being, but they need to look at their inside to come to well-being. When that is understood, and people then start to walk the path of looking within, and there are so many methods, psychology, so many therapies you can do, but it's all about taking back the projections and turning inward. And then that's how the healing begins. Yeah. So now comes the big difference. Because a child, when I closed myself, I didn't do that. I didn't close myself off, because whenever I did that, it would get worse. I would exasperate the negative charge that was projected onto me. So, but here's the big difference, is that as a child, I would, the motion would be to try and protect, to try and block it off, to try and ignore, by staying in my own world, pretend that's not happening, and not listening. So it is an ignoring of the other. It is a blocking off of the energy. How would that work? Again, by ignoring, protecting mechanism. Yes. And then it is the disassociation. That is when it's very deep, there's disassociation. And in this disassociation, you're also disassociating, obviously, also from this is the whole thing, the protection, the ignoring, and the disassociation. Here's the big difference to what I said, what children normally don't do, what we come to first when we have gained a certain amount of consciousness when we're grown up. Here's the difference. So in all of these methods, we're not present with ourselves. We're in fear. So it is also a reaction. It is a reaction to what's coming from the outside. It's a reaction to, we're not conscious. It's a protective mechanism. And so when these protective mechanisms kick in, and they are sensed by the other that is projecting onto us their negative emotion, then we repel the negative emotion, but they sense that there is the child protecting itself. There's the child rejecting. And it comes across in this, again, the mechanism, the pattern of projecting negative emotion unconsciously. Within that, it is interpreted as if I am attacking them, or as a primary caregiver, I am attacking them. They need to protect from me. And also it comes back as a judgment. You're not doing me good. You're wrong. You're wronging me. I don't deserve this. I'm protecting myself from you. I am afraid of you. And that exasperates this mechanism of projecting the negative charge. Because it holds that interpretation of you're not right, you're not good. And it's bringing it right back to them. When that's what they're projecting onto you, and they want you to accept it, and to go with it, and to agree with them, and to receive the negative emotion. And that's completely unconscious, to receive the negative emotion. It's just that if it's not received, it comes back to them, and then it's this, this again, within the field of, within the unconscious field, it just exasperates. It's really a mirror. It's like a mirror. Yeah. Because inside of the primary caretaker, of the person projecting, it's the same thing happening. It is this emotion being triggered, and it is, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't deserve that. That's not me. I don't want this. It's you. It's because of you. You're making this emotion. And you need to take it from me. With the trigger now, the child. You need to take it from me. So then, if the child closes off, it's two mirrors. And it just goes back and forth until it explodes, so to speak. But I don't want to say normally, but since the child is always naturally and innately trying to buffer everything, trying to catch the punches, trying to ameliorate, trying to come back into where the love can flow and reconcile as much as they can, adapt as much as they can, agree and be in a way that will just bring back the harmony and the love to flow. And we learn this. So what we are then conditioned to do as children, when we are wired in this way, and when we have this situation with our primary caretaker, is to receive the negative emotion, and then it's in your body, and then it's stuck there, and give the attention and to the primary caretaker and agree. So not have any boundaries, basically. Be completely open and receive it. Not have any boundaries. And because this can be, depending on the intensity of the negative emotion from the parent, this can be so unbearable that then disassociation happens. But then the children have to make sure that the parent doesn't notice that they're disassociating, because that again would be like they notice that, oh, there's a protective mechanism. So the disassociating is happening so even unconscious. It's not unconscious, but no, that is unconscious, yes. And then there's disassociation. So then it's a split off that is very deep, because it's unconscious to the child, yes. Because if it's not a disassociation, but if it is an ignoring, then that again would make the situation more dire. Possibly even, and this is the thing, if the child can sense again, this is unconscious, the amount of anger in the parent, and they can sense if that anger erupts, what could potentially happen, and sometimes accidents can happen and things can get hurt. And so it's always, that's the innate build, is that it takes care of its body, it takes care of its safety. And so it will not trigger the anger of a parent if there is a potential there to get hurt. Now, yes, there are children who they're much more courageous and so forth, but we don't have to even judge it that way as, oh, some children are not courageous and they're meek, and other children are courageous, the ones that stand up and so forth. I believe that there is this innate knowing of what can happen, and how how far you can push, from the child, of the parent, of how far they can push them. Because a child will never ever risk its own life. So if there is this like, wow, this is so close to the edge, there is a potential of true damage here, then you won't go there. And that's just this innate sensation. How some people, they snap when there's so much anger suppressed. And if that dam breaks, in other words, then there's no guarantee of what can happen. And so if you sense that as a child, you will not risk a crack in that dam. Yeah, so the difference is that as we evolve, as we grow older and more aware and so forth of ourselves, as our consciousness wakes back up to itself, as we have seen through the illusion of where we were falsely identified. And then consciousness grows as it retrieves its false identification, or as beliefs that have been seen to be not true, they dissolve, and then that energy stream is back in alignment. So when this has grown, your alignment with your soul consciousness, your awakeness to a certain degree, you will be ever more able to first you notice the mechanism. It just happens, and then later you feel bad that you allowed it to project instead of catching it and feeling it. So first your consciousness will be that you are become conscious of projecting, but the projecting and the anger being poured out to others is still going to happen. And at the same time, you are, the other way around, you are still going to also take on that anger if you are conditioned in this way. And you'll be aware of it. And then at some point the awareness grows and the consciousness grows to that degree that when it gets triggered, you immediately see it as your own. and as your opportunity to heal that part of yourself. And the only way to do that is in the trigger, you are fully present with what the emotion that got triggered. That's the only way. So as soon as negative emotion gets triggered, you give it your full attention. Now, usually that happens in the same way that it was as a child, and it will trigger that fear of, oh, if I'm now present with this, will it exasperate? You know, it will trigger that fear. So there is that challenge. And however, this challenge, this like, oh man, I really want to be present with my fear, but then I sense I'm going to trigger the others. I'm going to make it worse, you know, or yeah. I'm going to, yeah. They're going to feel rejected by me, and then they're going to have a negative reaction towards me. I don't want that. So okay, I'm not going to be present with my negative emotions. I'm just going to continue playing this game. But then you feel terrible because you're just recharging it. You're not healing it. So after a while of doing that and being aware of that mechanism, at some point you will ever more have that courage to find ways how to be and to be present with your negative emotion that is triggered, fully present, and feel it. Because it's just the only way is to be fully present, not to be in the story at all. Is to heal it and to you are regaining your own soul stream. It's coming back. It is the soul aspect of you that has been fragmented. That's how you take it back. So it's a great opportunity to be triggered. Now, here's the other thing. Why the anxiety when communicating boundaries? Of course, I know where it comes from, but why is it still there? So what is the missing? There was like something missing that I still do not dare to set up, to communicate boundaries and to be present with triggered negative emotion when it is triggered by another, in the presence of another. And to then withdraw my attention from them and to give all my attention within. Hold it within and be with myself. So, why is that? Of course, I know why it is from where it came from, but why is it still there? Why am I so afraid that doing this will trigger them even more or make them project onto me, think about me negatively? And why is that still so, why am I still afraid of that? Okay, here's the big difference. As long as there is still within me the slightest judgment toward the other, for being the way they are, for triggering me, am projecting. I am, as I'm projecting, because judgment, when I say judgment, I mean negative judgment. Negative judgment has negative charge. It can be super subtle, but it doesn't matter. Because when you are becoming, this is how it is, the more you retrieve of your soul aspects, the soul stream that is split, the more you bring it back into alignment, the stronger the soul is, the more sensitive you get. So that which is subtle can take up your whole space because you're so present with it. It can completely make you dysfunctional. Because you're at that level of, that's the next thing in line that is ready to come back home, to be seen. And it grasps your attention. I really need to drink some water now, but okay. Hold the thought, I need to drink some water. Okay, now we're in the sweet spot of recognition. So, you can notice that way that you still have judgment. Because if you would have no judgment toward those that you communicate your boundaries to, and that would also be, let's say you are in a conversation and the other person triggers you negative charge, negative emotion within you. And you knew that this is your opportunity to heal it. And for you to come back into well-being, you need to give it your full attention. And upon the knowing that this is the greatest gift you can give to the other as well, and not your attention. Continuing playing in this game, in this story, while your negative emotion is triggered. The best gift, the greatest gift you can also give to them is to heal this and be fully present. But that also means that you have to take yourself out of whatever conversation is going on. You have to break that flow, and you have to turn around your attention within and take it. Then you have to take the attention away from the other, yes. And the fear that then the other is going to, coming from the childhood, that the other is going to take that in a wrong way, in a bad way. And then to just communicate. One second. Or 1 second. It's going to take longer than that. So, excuse me, with all respect, I need to tend to my negative emotion, or whatever you're going to say. But somehow, you know, if you don't say anything in the middle of a conversation, you won't be, it will be very difficult to turn your attention inwards, because the other person is you're going to feel them, how confused they are, and you know, you're just, and they will experience that as rude because they don't understand, and you can understand that they would understand. They would think that is rude, and it would be then in that field very, very difficult to retrieve, you know, your attention inwards. So you would have to communicate those boundaries that you are setting, and even so, there's that huge fear that somehow that's going to trigger them, and that comes from childhood. Now, why is that, however? That fear is only there because there's a judgment towards them. There is a judgment that they triggered you. There is a judgment towards them in general because you are still projecting your negative emotion onto them. And that's why you're feeling bad. Because you're not completely owning it. You're not completely feeling it and holding it and bringing it back into, by healing it. That's why it feels bad. And you're projecting it onto them. But you may pretend you're not. You may pretend like, it may not be conscious to you. I just realized this. I just realized this because it was so subtle that and feeling the anxiety about communicating my boundaries is because there is still a judgment towards those that I communicate it to, that I am about to communicate it to, regardless of what, like a judgment of, it's really the fear that I feel that this brings up, I'm projecting onto them. I'm making them the culprits for it. Because they are the way they are, you know. And because in the past, it has been difficult to communicate boundaries. It hasn't been received in the right way. You know, same pattern, still playing itself out since childhood. A child does not, I'm not aware of this. I'm not aware of this within myself. In my memory, when I was a child, I'm not aware of this in other children that I've experienced being with. This first kicks in at a later point, that a child, and I wouldn't even say it's a child. It's probably already an adolescent. I feel that's where that starts. Judgment of negative judgment of parents. But let's say with children, I remember I could not. I would feel all this negative emotion coming from a primary caretaker, but there was no judgment there. There was suffering there, but there was not a true negative judgment. There was negative emotion, but even when a child says, "I hate you," you know, I've seen children say this, not just in movies. Or "I don't like you," or whatever. Doesn't have to be so strong. it's like this thin film on the surface that is just being, it's just flowing out. It's not, there is not a real identification there with I think you are a bad person. I don't like you. I hate you, you know. Now, there is to others. I know this. I know that I had these feelings and heavy judgments. I just remembered this as a child towards, for example, other men that I could see they were like flirting with my mom, let's say. And you know, if that was stronger, then I would have this strong protective feeling, and there was a feeling of stay away, you know, like there was really like this anger in me and this coldness in me, you know, if a man would come too close to my mom in that way. And my mom would sometimes then say, hey, you know, be nice. But that it was true. I did not like them. But again, it wasn't about them. I didn't even know them. It wasn't even about them. It was the behavior. It was the behavior. But a child's heart is always so available. Like the second that the spell is broken, they're like right there. They respond to love immediately. There's not this layers and layers and layers of story identification of who I am that is like this blockage between this blockage to the love in the heart, which is your true being. That is your true being. Your soul is love in your heart. That's your soul. And presence. And aliveness. The energy, the aliveness, the presence. The awareness, the consciousness. Well-being. Peace. Stillness of the heart. Harmony. That is all the soul. But this judgment is slowly seeps in, and there's more and more and more. Within the identification, in the conditioned mind, in the story about who you are, then the judgment solidifies and becomes, it's just there. Becomes your judgment. And I noticed that, and I just realized that if I have no judgment, and I'm having now two scenarios as an example in my mind where I'm tuning into and feeling into it. If there was no judgment, if there was just love towards those others, now as an adult, yeah? Or at least neutrality. It doesn't have to be active love. It doesn't have to be someone that is so close. Now these people were relatively, okay, not going into the story. At least neutrality. So no judgment. If there is no judgment, it is completely free. You are completely free to say when negative emotion is triggered. And that is that's the real, well, you could say it's a challenge, but you're just observing it. But that is the real challenge, is when negative emotion is triggered by another, to not project it onto them. To not have negative judgment there. It goes hand in hand. So as long as I have the negative judgment, I cannot say I need to turn within. I need to retrieve my attention from this conversation and turn within. That's why there is so much fear. I can't do that because it's not a real turning within as long as as long as the judgment remains. So as long as I'm like, oh, you, this and this, you know, I'm not having this conversation anymore. I'm triggered in negative emotion. I need to tend to my negative emotion. Or you could say it friendly. You could say very friendly. You could say, I'm sorry I have to stop this at this point, but I feel that I'm negatively triggered and I need to give it my attention. None of that is going to work. And of course, coming from, if there is still unconscious judgment within you for that person, that person is probably not going to have a harmonious reaction to it and just say, okay. But that person is going to feel cut off and disrespected. Yeah? Because it is true, you are disrespecting them. You have judgment towards them. And the whole story in your mind, your conditioned mind, is going to conspire to support your righteousness, to say, well, but they are wrong, or they are this and that. Always negative connotation, always holding negative charge, always holding a negative emotion. They are this and that, and it's not something beautiful, and something like, but they are this and that, and something you don't like. Something that makes you feel in a way that's not good. They triggered you in the first place. That is a great challenge, so I'm going to say it like this, to not project onto the person that triggers us. At the same time, we can see it in this way, that every time we get triggered, it is that great opportunity. It is the golden opportunity and the only opportunity to heal what is now being presented. What presents. Now what is now triggered, now loose, now in my field, now in my emotions. The only opportunity to heal that. Or it'll come back. It'll come back. But the way to heal it, you have to feel it. It can, of course, there are many ways to come into contact with it. But if you don't do it in a therapeutic way, life will continue to always present you with what you're ready to receive. And every time something is triggered, even if you stay unconscious, it will help you by getting bigger, by recharging it, because then that's the only way, is that the charge builds to the point where it explodes, and then in that explosion, although you lose some feathers, every time it has to go to that place of explosion, you lose feathers, but it makes space. Because in this, as I said before, in the breakdown, we release a lot of that charge. So how can I do this? How can I not judge? Because it's not something I can decide to do. How can I release this judgment if it's keeping me from healing this negative charge within me, and it's keeping me caught in this anxiety loop, and from standing fully within my truth, in my column of light, fully aligned with my soul. So it goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand to, in order to take all my attention within and sit with a negative emotion, I have to also reel back, or dissolve the judgments. Towards those that triggered them. It can also be in your mind that you're thinking of a situation with a person, and then you get triggered, and then you project it towards that person. And as long as there is still that negative charge towards that person, it can be as subtle as a tiny little feather. It'll come back. You're still hooked. You're still hooked. So it is always the awareness of this whole pattern, of this whole mechanism, that will liberate it. So in the awareness of this, which is also the reason why I'm talking about it, in the awareness of this, I can, when I notice, oh yeah, so let's go there. Oh yeah, I do have negative. I do have judgment. It's so subtle, it's so tiny, but it's still there. And so that's the golden opportunity to go and really go into that judgment and feel that judgment. And then when you really feel that judgment, you want to do that right now? So I'm going to feel the judgment towards those that I am afraid to trigger and receive negative projection from when I communicate my boundaries. And then what happens is, when I'm in that story and I allow my image of them to sit in that frequency. It's almost like it's a feeling that exudes from their images. When I think of them, and that will then, I will feel that somewhere in my body. And that's the golden opportunity, because now I have the possibility to simply feel the emotion in my body and sit with it. Because that's where the judgment sits. That's where the energy is stuck. That's where there's still fear. And fear, that's just the other side of the judgment. Because it can only happen where there is not oneness, where there is not truth, where there is not love. That's the only place where judgment can happen. Now, when I say love, it can also be neutral. This doesn't have to be only with people that we love. It can also be with strangers, for example, or other people that trigger anger and hate that we project onto them. It doesn't come into love. But it comes into that they don't trigger us anymore, and they they go into, doesn't hold a charge anymore, and they just are released out of our field. They have no more impact. Yeah. So neutral, and then when it goes to neutral, then we're back with ourselves, and we have received our soul stream back to us. And their job is done, and then they just go. Or if there is love, then that can flow again. But so that's what I mean. I'm talking about love because that's only when this is with someone that you have love for, when we're with people that you have love for. Otherwise, it's neutral. So judgment can only sit on fear. It can only come when there is within yourself a part of your energy stream that you have that is split off from your soul stream and identified in conditioned mind as story not based in truth. So all this drama that we play out with others, judgment and fear of judgment, both sides of the same coin, two sides of the same coin. Is all of it is a wake-up call. All of it is the golden opportunity to remember ourselves. And this is the remembering actually physically, energetically, to bring back all the light streams that are cut off and that are feeding negative energy into our light body, our aura, and into the, continuously rippling out negative, which is a distorted sound. It's not harmonious. It's a distorted sound. And everything that comes back and is attracted and shows up in your life is a match, is a frequential match to that which is in your field that you send out. Everything that is conscious and everything that is unconscious. Part of your field, of course, that which is shining into your field, that which is the mother of sound, of course, but already also has light being bent also as your soul. Sound already having notes and frequential patterns already as your soul. But then it gets more intricate, more dense, and the melodies get more intricate, if you wish. The more it comes into the physical rhythm and so forth. So when the harmonious light and sound is broken because it cannot flow in your column of light, in the light stream, where your soul, your heart of your soul, is connected to the heart of the planet, the heart of the sun, and so forth, So it emits through this body, through this mind. That's where it gets spent even more, where the DNA weaves tighter. However, if that is done in disharmony, in a distorted way, because our mind because our attention is unconsciously fixed in beliefs about who we are, in an image of ourselves, as opposed to I am being, I am, in presence. If the story within the conditioned mind is not based in separation, so the story of I love this person, or I love the sunrise, or the sun rises every morning, or my favorite color is blue, whatever. Those kind of stories, which you could also say is already a framework, already some kind of, my favorite color is blue, some kind of identification. Or I love this person. That's true. And that can be, like I love this person, that's true. But, okay, my favorite color is blue, yeah. There is no, that's harmonious is what I'm saying. It's in harmony with your soul stream. it's not split off from your soul stream, because it is not based, these beliefs that make up our life story as well, are not, they don't need, in order to exist, the base belief that I am alone in the universe, I am cut off from the light, I am cut off from God, I'm cut off from life. We're all objects in this objectivity, and this is who I am, and all I have when this is active, or when I believe this, is only the story of the body. This is who I am, only the story of the body. And then it's about this story of the body being alone, and then there are others, and everything is so you really, if there is this cut offness, then it is everyone against everyone, and it's fear-based, and I always have to protect myself, and I always have to fight to get what I need, because what I need is then obviously not on my inside. If I'm cut off from God, then love is not something that I am and that I'm always connected to, because I am love, I am soul, I am light, I am all that is. A fractal of all that is. I am a fractal of all that is, and in my heart I am one with all that is. In my heart of hearts, all hearts are, this is scientific, all hearts are, it's the singularity in the center of the heart. The heart is a portal. This is all science. Other videos. So it's only the stories that have that at their basis, that take that as for granted at their basis, that don't feel good, that have a negative charge, that where the frequency is low, and you can only feel this in comparison to the truth, and the truth is always this, is going to be higher frequency, is a unified field. The awareness, as I said before, and so the split off in comparison to this is what is feeling, This is what is feeling. You are feeling this split off energy as you are identifying here in this false story, and that's what hurts. That's what hurts, and it always wants to come together. It always wants to remember. And that's what life always presents, this opportunity, by triggering, what's here, what's on the, what is not remembered yet. And so I'm going to stop this video now, and then I'm going to go into that feeling of judgment, to be very, very clear, to know this, that if I feel anxious to say, oh, negative judgment is triggered, negative emotion is triggered while I am in a communication with someone, it is because I have judgment towards them. It is because I am projecting towards them. And now that I know that, the next step is to feel that judgment, to grasp it. It is there, the proof is there, that otherwise I wouldn't be afraid. Fear, judgment. Same, both sides of the same coin. So, now that I know I have that, it's perfect because they're right in front of me. So I just need to then say to myself, I don't know how to do this. It's not a recipe or anything. I haven't done this yet, but I'm just realizing, is to opportunity to feel the judgment that I have. Feel, where am I projecting? And that's the same thing. So I could say, okay, I just need to, I'm sensing I have judgment here. I need to, and I want to feel it. Ooh, how does that feel? So much better, so much more real, so much more owning of what is. Yeah. And that's why it doesn't work otherwise to say, I need to retrieve and feel myself while there is still judgment. It's not going to go down well because I'm not seeing everything. I'm not in the truth. And I won't be able to reconcile in that field. I won't be able to take it within because I'm not owning my judgment. So there's still that leakage that's going out that cannot be healed, where I'm still feeling negative. I'm feeling bad because there is still judgment. So owning my judgment, especially when it's subtle, because those are the tricky ones, the ones that you don't even realize you have them. But if you're afraid to communicate something to someone, it's because you have judgment towards them. You're projecting your fear onto them, and there's a story to support that, and that's judgment. So, golden opportunity, feel the judgment. I have judgment, yes. And you feel it, you think about them, you feel it, you know you have it. And then you will feel it, you will immediately feel that part in your body, and just be present with that energy in your body. And it's like, I want my judgment. I want to feel my judgment that I have, because otherwise I won't be able to feel good. Otherwise I won't be able to heal. So it is mine. And it becomes a gift when I heal it, because then, energy that has been blocked and cut off now is free again to flow into my energy stream. And when that has happened, I can freely communicate my boundaries. And that's a beautiful thing. If I can, without fear, communicate my boundaries, it comes from either between neutrality to love. That's when the other person can hear it and actually feels empowered by that. Because it empowers them to do the same. But before I do not own my judgment, that won't happen.